Hello, hello. Sure, Paul will be coming in a minute. Despite what the name says, I'd like to introduce Paul Yeghiayan. Uh, but first, my name's Larry Raff. I'm president of Copley Raff, a national fundraising consulting firm for nonprofits, and the creator of Abacus Major Donor Ask Calculator, which is a sponsor of this webinar. I am thrilled that Paul Yeghiayan is joining me. Paul is a good friend and longtime colleague. He is a senior consultant at the Benefactor Group, a certified fundraising executive, certified specialist in planned giving, and the president-elect of the AFP chapter in Washington, D.C., the largest AFP chapter in the country. So Paul is a wealth of information, as well as being a master trainer for AFP. So he'll be able to show us some tips when we have this conversation. So thank you again for joining us, and Paul, welcome.
Thank you so much, Larry. I'm really happy to be here and happy to talk about this subject.
Super, super. So we're going to talk about how to speed up finding relationships between your stakeholders, like board members, and your donor candidates, because after all, this is a people-to-people business, and we need relationships in order to do fundraising. So let me start with a question. Who are the most important stakeholders to involve in finding those relationships with your best donors?
Yeah, sure, Larry. I mean, I'd say in some ways this is very similar to the way that you would identify donors, and it's sort of from the inside out. So the most important stakeholders are going to be your current board members. I would say sort of the second level there would be perhaps individuals who participate in committees of the board, but maybe are not current board members. Maybe they're on sort of an advisory committee. I would also look at past board members as well. I would certainly, if your organization does events, I would certainly look for event volunteers. Additionally, if your organization has programs that perhaps uses volunteers, I would absolutely be including them in this conversation as well. And then sort of lastly, I would look at current and past executives of the organization and also current and past program leaders. I would say that cohort, if you will, is probably the most important stakeholders in finding those relationships.
Paul, I'm glad you included program directors. They are a wealth of information that are often overlooked by fundraisers. The program directors tend to have relationships with people in the field because they're forward facing often.
Yes.
Excuse me. And can be overlooked and have some great relationships with people.
Yeah, for sure, Larry. And I think program leaders also facilitate a lot of conversations between funders, donors, senior staff, and the beneficiaries of those programs. And so I think there's a wealth of understanding and relationships that they have there, and they can provide some really keen insights.
Well, makes a whole lot of sense. Let me ask you this. How do you speed up that process of sort of matching the stakeholders with those donor candidates? I don't like using the word prospect anymore, so I use donor candidates.
Sure.
Or donors, because many of these people are already donors to the organization. How do you speed up that process?
So I think, I would approach it very, I would create a specific method around this. And the first thing I would do is, hopefully your organization has a reasonably good CRM system, and you have been tracking your current and perhaps lapsed donors and your donor candidates, as you said. And I would also add another term I hear that I also don't like are as suspects, which is a term that I certainly don't think that we should be using. But what I would do is if the coding on your in your database is reasonably good, or even if you've been doing some of this in a spreadsheet, hopefully you have some type of attribute around these individuals. And what you would do is pull sort of your top uh, candidate list, if you will, from the donor file. And when you get that list, an additional thing that you can also do, and you can do this, it's particularly helpful if, so you're more regionally based organization, you can work with, say, Donor Search or iWave or one of these other organizations, and you can sort of do sort of a broader screening of people in the general community where you are. So from there, what you're doing is you're trying to pull a list that could be anywhere from, say, 100 to 300 or 400 names would typically what you would be looking for. And what you want to do with each of those is you want to create criteria, sort of evaluation criteria. So in this case, it may be things like number of gifts, total giving, largest single gift, any type of philanthropic rating that you may have on them, and then of course any sort of recency and frequency of giving as well. And then you could sort of you can sort of rank them accordingly. And what you want to do with this sort of stakeholder group that we were talking about before is think about what type of relationship might they have with these individuals that you've put together in this list. So it could be, say, the top relationship would be, this is someone that I know well, I meet with often, lunch, dinner, that type of a relationship, something close. And then it could be someone who they would consider to be a peer, that they know, maybe in a more professional setting, someone who would take their call, but not necessarily someone that they're intimately close with. And then a third criteria could be that they have a loose relationship with this individual, that they're sort of run in the same circles, but they don't really know them particularly well. They know of them, but they don't really have any type of a relationship. So you could sort of score those, like 1 through 4, 1 through 5, depending on the criteria that you want. But that would be, I would create a document with that, basically name, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 next to each name. With a clear explanation as to what all of those numbers mean. And that would be sort of a tool. And you could use that both in an analog way, and you could create a digital version of it as well using something like SurveyMonkey. But it creates a way for you to sort of track and for your stakeholders to review.
I think that method really works well, and I've used it. And in fact, one additional criteria that we often will use is, I don't know this person, but he or she should be on our radar. Mm-hmm. And you circle like a 5, or I'm willing to ask this person for a gift and have that as one of the scores. So you immediately get information that's actionable, and that process can go very well. And people can go through a list of even 500 or 600 names inside of 10 or 15 minutes. So it's not that overwhelming a request. But my question to you is how do you get people to sit down and actually go through the list and give you that information? And what if they're afraid you're going to ask them to ask that person for a gift and they don't want to do that?
Sure. Yeah, that's absolutely true, Larry. So to the first part of your question, I think there's a couple of ways to get them to do it. Now, if it's board members or a committee is meeting, and you're doing this in person, I would simply hand out the document. That will likely be multi-page. and say we're going to do an exercise. This is take the next 10 minutes or so. Please just quickly go through all of these names, and if you have any type of a relationship with them, based on the criteria that we've outlined, just go ahead and circle. If you don't know them or don't know anything about them, just skip them and try to go through this, again, in about 10, maybe 15 minutes maximum. So that's a good way to do it with a board. You may be able to also do that with volunteers if there's some type of a volunteer gathering. It's best if you can do it in person, just so that you have a little more control over the process. But I would say that this can be done online as well. You just have to have sort of a deadline when people need to do it, and again, you can just create name and then the number of choices that people make.
You know, like in a Word document or a Google Doc or something like that.
Sure. Well, you can do it like that, or you do like Survey Monkey, because that could be pretty easy to export out of as well. And you could make the instructions written, or you could even do a quick video and just explain to folks what it would be like. But again, make sure that you have a deadline for the completion of that, so you can get the information. But within the instructions, to your second part of your question, is that people understand, one, they're not soliciting these folks for money. They're not necessarily even 100% vouching for these folks that they would have any interest. What they're doing is just saying, this is someone within my general sphere, who and as we know, people tend to have relationships with people who are similar to them. So if they're volunteering, or they're a board member, or they're a donor to your organization, it's likely that other people in their general circle would have some similar interests. So all they're doing is helping the organization expand its sphere of influence, and to find people who are like-minded. So that's what they're doing. We wouldn't be approaching anyone saying, hey, so and so said I should talk to you, and certainly wouldn't do that without the permission of this stakeholder.
That sort of leads to my next question. So once you've gathered all this information from all of these screening lists, and you've entered the information into your database or into an Excel document or something of the like, then what? How do you operationalize that exercise?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would actually take one step back from that and make sure that the way that you enter this into your database is done appropriately. So most CRM systems will allow you to create some type of attribute field or attribute fields. So I would make sure that you're very clear, garbage in, garbage out type of thing. So make sure that the data that you're using is clean. But another thing that you sort of want to rank this. So once these stakeholders have gone through this list, what you're going to find is there are going to be names that come to the top that will say, we have, let's say we had 25 stakeholders reviewing this, and our top donor candidate, if you will, had 15 people who knew this individual in some capacity. You can rank these, and by doing so, you can create tiers of, like, here's a group, let's say, of the 500, here's a group of 25 or 50 that we seem to have a lot of relationships with, and many of those relationships seem to be relatively close. I would say that this is a very that's your tier one group. Those are the folks that are most likely to take a call, to take a meeting, to do something of that sort. So when as you look and create sort of this tiered list, from there you want to start to consider what are the strategies that you're going to take moving forward. And I would create a broad strategy per tier, and then I would create a specific strategy per donor candidate, to understand, with timelines, thinking like, when do we want to reach out, maybe invite them to an event, maybe invite them for lunch. If it's appropriate, it could be scheduling a meeting with the president or executive director or a board chair, other things like that. But think about, based on the ranking, who would the best person be to contact them initially, and sort of who do you bring with you on that potential donor journey.
Mm-hmm. I hadn't thought of that tiered approach. I think that's a really good approach. Additionally, especially for those board members that are, or stakeholders who are sort of themselves top candidates or major donors, to just sit down with them and go through the names where they've ranked those relationships highly, and you can get them to tell you about them and put a little flesh on the bone of those donors, so you can build strategy.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I apologize. I did sort of skip a step there, because I think that this is what a lot of us sort of call street prospecting. It's like getting information not from philanthropic screening, but actually from people that know know them, and may have deeper insights, and likely far more valuable insights, into the individual. It could be anything from, I know that now is not a good time. Maybe they recently lost someone in the family, or now is actually a great time because they're about to sell a business, and they're going to have a big tax liability coming, or but to sort of get that insight. But also, what it does is that it really builds on the ranking that you did, because it a number connected with somebody is one thing, but getting a couple, 3 paragraphs of some background is even more useful, and perhaps understanding more deeply what those relationships really look like. This can be particularly helpful sometimes for lapsed donors, or perhaps even someone who is somewhat disgruntled with the organization, which in my experience, disgruntled donors care.
They care. They're disgruntled because they care.
Right. And there's often a lot of opportunity there. It could many of these issues come up just as because there was some kind of misunderstanding, or perhaps a former staff member didn't do their job very well. But it's an opportunity to try to sort of repair those relationships, so again, this can be helpful. And also, if you see someone and there's multiple people that know them, you can get insights from all of them, and that builds a much more detailed picture of who this person is. And through that, any good gift officer will be able to see the linkage, and just really help lay out a strategy for building a relationship with this person. And I think that's extremely useful.
Well put. I think the whole process is also valuable to get closer to the screeners, to the stakeholders who are doing the screening. It's sort of a backdoor way to get in front of some people you may not have other reason to get in front of. And through this screening process and the follow-up that you talked about, you're actually doing a touch or two with that important stakeholder, board member, past board chair, what have you, generally wealthy, supportive, solid donor, and it gives you a chance to get in front of them that you wouldn't otherwise have, or your CEO or someone else of import, to cultivate them even further.
Yeah, for sure, Larry. And I would say this method is also very impactful in building a culture of philanthropy, which is one of those phrases that gets used a lot. But here's an actual tool or a process that actually does build a culture of philanthropy, because you're talking to stakeholders, people who are close to your organization, and you're asking them to help build the strength of that organization through the relationships that they have, through the insights that they can provide. I would also say that this can be particularly useful around legacy giving. So organizations that are looking to build their legacy giving, perhaps they have a legacy society, heritage society of some sort. This is a great opportunity to expand that. And we know with the great intergenerational transfer of wealth that's happening right now, that even talking to some of your donors and seeing them also as stakeholders,
Mhm.
and sort of building that pool of candidates, as you said, prospects. I think that there's a lot of value there. And when you're speaking with some of your supporters, you're not just asking them, again, to make a contribution financially, but you're asking them, from an identity perspective, because we have to understand that, a lot of people's identities, at least part of it, is being reflected in the organizations that they support. It's like, so who shares some identities with you that would connect to these organizations? And not to belabor some of the early stages of building this sort of method is also something to consider, that I think can expand this as well, is of actually creating donor personas to your organization, and that you can use that in the tiered process. But you can say, for instance, perhaps you create 3 to 5 donor personas for your
So
organization.
describe a persona.
So
I'd be the George Clooney persona, obviously, but
obviously,
but
yes.
what would some of the other ones be?
So it would be things like age, education level, sex, gender, maybe political affiliation, things that connect them in some way, or that help sort of identify their interests. And I'll give you an example. One organization that I work with, they had a very elaborate direct mail program, and they were able to very clearly identify that personas such as women between the age of 45 and 65, college educated, income of $75,000 a year and above, lived in certain areas, urban, somewhat or close suburban areas, identify as liberal, voted Democrat, key issues that were important for them. So they're able to do that, and so that kind of creates a persona.
So the messaging would be specific to that persona.
But also understanding that those are your most likely donor candidates, are people that sort of fit within the general scheme of that persona. And to be clear, it would be, you don't want just one persona, but somewhere between 3 to 5. So going back to the legacy topic that I made, that might be a particular persona.
So maybe someone who's given 10 plus times would be a persona. Right. They're loyal. They could be a decent candidate for a plan giving discussion or the statement.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So we have a question from Dave Kinahan. Dave, glad you're on board here. So Dave asks, what are some creative ways you have seen organizations build their pipeline at early engagement? Are there strategies specific to arts organizations versus alumni-based organizations? And this is coming from a guy who's been involved with children's hospitals. So Dave, I'm glad you're interested in arts and education programs too.
Sure. Well, I mean, this may sound a bit simplistic, but again, going back to the idea that people's peers, or people within their social group tend to have similar values, similar interests. So if there was, someone who was involved with your organization, it was an arts organization, they likely know other people who are interested in the arts. And in my experience working with art organizations, um, there's typically events, and this is a great way to sort of bring people in, a new gallery showing, some type of event. So I would ask if the stakeholder was open to it, whether they would actually be willing to invite someone to come with them. That way, it doesn't appear that just it's the organization reaching out, but that this is particularly good if it's a board member or a key volunteer, someone like that who could say, hey, they're going to be doing this great showing. Would you consider joining me for this? I think that's a wonderful way to get people to sort of come out and share. Also, if they're doing you're working with people and maybe doing some type of house party to give some program impact updates. It's also a way that, hey, would you like to learn more about this? Would you be open to learning more about how we're expanding arts with youth, or other things of this sort, and again trying to see if the stakeholder would make that invitation, again not a solicitation but an invitation, that this is something that's important to me. I think that it may be something that interests you.
Get them to smell the grease paint, so to speak,
Yeah,
the painting, the oil, and on the painting, or what have you. But
absolutely.
get them emotionally exposed
Yes, for sure.
to the arts.
Yeah.
Good question, David. If anybody else has a question, feel free. An overarching, I think, point I'd like to make on this whole topic is anytime you have the opportunity to be in front of a stakeholder in a meaningful way for a productive thing to do with them to further your mission is an opportunity you should always take. And this is a sort of a double-edged or two-sided coin, in that you get to meet with your closest stakeholders at the same time identifying future potential close stakeholders at the same time, and donors, of course, making this a valuable process to be doing is an ongoing basis. Because I would add that we do something called flash screening, and that is, gee, we've done this main list and we're working it, but all of a sudden another 6 or 8 or 10 people have shown up as good donor candidates, and we want to once again see if the stakeholders know these 10 people. You can do via email a similar kind of process, a real quick flash. Does anybody know these folks? Keeping those big names in your pockets and letting them and seeing if those people are connected.
Yeah, for sure. And I would just reiterate, document when you're having these conversations, so that and then after the documentation, think of what the next 2 or 3 steps would be, and sort of map that out, because otherwise we all get overwhelmed. We forget things, and sometimes that means some missed opportunities. So I would, just make sure that you capture that information and give yourself another 2 or 3 steps, and you should be in pretty good shape.
I'm going to give the audience a minute or two to think about additional questions, and I'm going to take a personal point of privilege and share with folks a little bit about abacus. All of you fundraisers that are tuned in, obviously, I think experience the following issue. You're getting ready to do an ask, and you have all this donor information, and you have their wealth rating and their street research that we just talked about, but you still need to come up with a number to ask for, to propose to them for a major gift or a 3-year pledge. And you know that the numbers, the research I've done over the last 10 years has indicated there's tremendous personal bias with fundraisers in terms of coming up with that number. Your experience in the field, your relationship to money, the nature of your organization all play into those biases. And the capacity estimates you get from these services are not always something you can hang your hat on, and you never think you have enough information. So the Abacus Major Donor Ask Calculator addresses these things because it gives you a readiness score, it gives you a suggested ask amount and a goal to expect. It's proven results. We're within 2% of actual pledges thus far, and also, most importantly, I think, is its usefulness in being a planning tool. By using this goal amount here, the $30,000, on 50 or 100 profiles that you might do, that bottom line number, once you've exported all the information and added up that column, you have a good idea of the value of your pipeline or the value of your portfolio that you can then use going forward in planning a campaign or planning to hire an additional development officer or gift officer. So I encourage you to visit donorabacus.com to check it out. Thanks for your indulgence. Let me see if we have any other questions before we give people back their time. I think that is it. I want to thank everyone for joining us. And Paul, I want to thank you very much. And for all your viewers, Paul is not Larry. Paul is Paul. And this is a glitch of technology for us. But thank you all for joining us. Have a good day.
Thanks, Larry. Bye-bye.
Bye.